Good morning. Sorry, I started a little late. Hi. He'll be here in a minute. Please enjoy our George Washington Bridge. Hi, good morning, Sarah. Do you hear me? That's wonderful. Wonderful to see you. Oh, here he is.
Should we keep this on? It's okay to keep.
So far, it's okay. I'll talk to.
Seems all right.
Yeah, it seems okay.
Okay.
Just come on.
How am I doing? Okay. Here, take this out. Okay. Uh-oh.
Did I do something wrong?
No. It's my favorite reed is on the floor. Maybe
Always.
I will use this, I think. No.
Always.
Actually, I think it's a little too thin. Anyway.
Good morning. I just want to know, is microphone working or not?
Yeah, just a second.
Let me take
Organize myself a tiny bit more. And I apologize for being late once again.
Maha.
So I have to say one of my great friends and mentors, the wonderful flutist Samuel Barron, when I got my first teaching position, and I was wondering, I was concerned because at that time I was doing.
Can you hold this again?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you make sure? Do you hear us? Sound is good. Joanne, thank you, Joanne. That's okay, because it doesn't work for me. Okay, go ahead. So that means working for you, but it doesn't work for me.
Oh.
No, it's okay. I will fix.
Shall we just try it again? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Because don't worry.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
I see you doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow the film is fuzzy.
Fuzzy?
Yeah, because we put that stuff on the...
I don't think so.
It is. Sorry everybody, I have to clean this.
No, but then we have...
Oh, that better. It was dirty, simply. Okay, now it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's funny.
The finger technique.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, it's working.
Okay.
Now I'll go.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I apologize for being late, and as I began to say, that though I was advised by my wonderful friend and a mentor to me, this is the great flutist Samuel Barron, who for many years was the flutist of the New York Woodwind Quintet, which I joined. I have to say, also, my father, Irving Neidich, also a wonderful clarinetist, was a member of the competition for the New York Woodwind Quintet. It was called the New Art Woodwind Quintet. But the New York Woodwind Quintet still exists now.
But
Oh, what happened again?
let me try. I'm so sorry.
What?
Let me try to do this. Okay, one more time.
Is it better now?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead. So your father...
Sorry, always this. Can you hear that,
Yeah,
or is your
yes.
yeah? It's not your earphones, which you're using different ones.
Don't worry about me.
I worry about everything. I worry about the world. Too much worries. Anyway, but today there are perhaps a couple fewer worries than there were couple days ago. What was I talking about? Oh, Samuel Barron, the grateful flutist, and the New York Woodwind Quintet, New Art Woodwind Quintet. This is all, of course, completely not part of what I was going to talk about, and totally uninteresting. But in any case, Samuel Barron advised me when I got my first teaching job, and I was actually very busy commuting all over the place, basically, to playing concerts. He gave me very important advice, and he said that from the beginning, you have to establish a kind of pattern and a kind of persona. So, if you are late, or if you do this, you have to do that with conviction. So I have taken that advice very seriously since then. Anyway, once again, I say to everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all healthy. As I mentioned in my introduction, this is the beginning of a new era, and hopefully the beginning of a gradual return to something which is more or less normal. Of course, it will be new, but anyway, at least we kind of now can begin to see, as we say, the light at the end of the tunnel. Now we have in the United States, a new administration. This is Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Biden is very active, really trying to undo so much of what the previous administration did. And in fact, as we saw in the run-up to the election, how the previous administration, Trump, attempted to make the transition to the election, then from the election, after the election, I should say, make the transition to the new administration as painful as possible. Not only with the insinuation with the actual blanket false assertions that the election was actually somehow fraudulent, etc., etc. Thank you. Now I can function better. Thank you. This is unusually good this morning because I didn't make it. Great, let me go here, this, come back. I like this chair, sort of. So it's not only a kind of tremendous weakening of the environmental blah 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 blah. Now I'm totally, see, I had my great coffee and I can't think. Well, this sort of environmental regulations and laws, the sort of denuding of them all, the idea of being able to drill in the Tongass Forest in Alaska, etc., etc., these are all things which Biden has pledged to actually overturn, and he's promised to reinstate more than 100 regulations aimed at environmental protection that our former President Donald Trump dismantled under the premise that they were bad for business. Of course, as I am constantly mentioning, this is a concept of business which is separate from people, except for the few people who own the business. Anyway, so what else? There was also the Trump's kind of clemency factory, I should say, that he sort of instituted right before leaving office, and for pardoning all his friends, including someone like this Philip S. Forms, who was a former nursing home executive and who was behind one of the biggest Medicare frauds in United States history. Well, he's gone free. Unbelievable. From the New York Times, I read that Biden has released a 200-page document, which is called the National Strategy for COVID-19 Response and Pandemic Preparedness. And the federal government finally is taking a central role in countering COVID-19, the coronavirus. We found out that, in fact, there was no plan to distribute the vaccines which have been developed. So they are coming out. People are being vaccinated, but it's actually very chaotic right now, and hopefully that will be able to be regularized more quickly than slowly. Biden has also rejoined the WHO, of course, so that you can have a worldwide cooperation in handling the pandemic, and the Paris Climate Agreement. All these things are incredibly like a breath of fresh air, I must say. Of course, he still has a lot of opposition in Congress and outside of Congress, and he talks about unity, but let's see what can actually happen along those lines. So what should I talk about now? I have so much here to talk about. Yeah, there's one thing I was wondering about, however, which was a small article which I read in CNN. That's on the web. Actually, in the Times as well. I read this, that people are worried that the Trump administration may be looting the White House, as CNN said. And we are seeing what looks like a moving day, where you're seeing items coming out of the West Wing, and they've saw Larry Kudlow leaving earlier. This is just a few days ago, of course, with a bust of Abraham Lincoln being carried out, and a painting with the Trump presidential painting, which should stay in there. So, as it was written, people need to know that the items inside the White House are not giveaways. They are not souvenirs which the departing administration can actually take home with them. This is not an estate sale or antiques roadshow, but yet you're seeing some White House staffers taking mementos as with they go, and it's a kind of surreal, strange sort of look at the end days of the Trump presidency. This was the reporter Acosta talking about this. But that's a little article, and then we hear nothing about it. So hopefully they've either been returned, or perhaps there was some kind of misunderstanding. I'm being very generous. I think with this beginning of New Era, I can afford to be generous, at least for now. Okay, so yes, so that I should say that the current administration is trying to rectify a lot of what was sort of destroyed earlier, and unfortunately, that actually will take away from other things that they have to do. So hopefully this can be accomplished rather quickly. I can mention also, let me see, what do I have here? Okay. Yeah. I'm really a little bit scatterbrained. Taking more coffee. With the exit of President Trump, many of his followers are actually in kind of disarray, and I think that's been very good for the present administration. And you even find some of his most ardent supporters, such as this group called the Proud Boys, this very alt-right militant group, who are calling now Trump a total failure and calling him weak, etc., etc. Now, this, of course, is dangerous, not for the moment, but maybe for the near future. So let's hope that actually it doesn't become more serious than simply calling names. Anyway. Okay, but still, of course, the coronavirus is not under control in the world, and in England there's a really severe lockdown now. The United States is out of control still. It's with highest numbers that we've ever had. And I just want to mention, do something. Do I look any better? I think probably I pretty look not so great today, yeah? I didn't put it on the makeup that I never use. Okay, anyway, I want to just mention something which was highlighted in the New York Times today, and it had to do with Yuma County, Arizona, which is a microcosm of the systemic failures which have caused COVID-19 to rage uncontrolled in the United States. Now, Yuma County is one of the sort of breadbaskets of the United States. It produces vegetables, lettuce, broccoli, leafy greens, and in that way it is a very important area for the well-being of the states, of the U.S. However, over the course of the pandemic, as the Times writes, the Yuma area has identified coronavirus cases at a higher rate than any other U.S. region. So 1 out of every 6 residents has come down with the virus. It's an area between San Diego and Phoenix, and there's only one hospital which can be called at all local. It's understaffed, of course, and is not the kind of hospital which had been set up for such kind of pandemic response. So the patients have been airlifted out to other cities, and the situation is still really terrible. For instance, the local governments invited those 75 years and older, and teachers and law enforcement, etc. That was the original first people who were supposed to get the vaccine. So they invited them, and then second notice went out that they did not have vaccines. They had run out. In part because the state officials did not take into account the fact that in the wintertime the population there actually grows. That's something that you don't have to even live there just to have a feeling about. So the Amanda Aguirre, maybe, I don't know, I can't pronounce that name, I'm sorry. The president of the Center for Border Health, which is a network of nonprofit clinics, said that there was no plan to get the vaccine to the people who need it. And we don't have time to wait, of course. A lot of the problem was that the state government in Arizona refused to institute any kind of stringent measures so that everything was open, restaurants, gyms, barbershops. There's no mandate for particular social distancing, anything like that. These very poor migrant workers who are there still have to crowd into very crowded buses in order to get to work. This is really remarkable, but it is kind of snapshot of the failure of the system and how we cannot have a response to something like this pandemic or to any kind of catastrophe that's in the works or this happening without a coordinated systemic response. All right. So I go on with this now. To something very related. Yes, yeah, I know I'm going down. That's I'm going, but now I go up. My partner in crime over there is constantly admonishing me with her hand to go up. I guess I go up. Yeah. So last week we had Martin Luther King Day. So Martin Luther King Jr. was not only the hero for me when I was a boy, he was the hero for many, many in my generation. And I want to speak just briefly now about what he was trying to do before his assassination, which was a tremendous tragedy. We had a time of really three horrendous assassinations. John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy. Without those assassinations, it's possible that the world would have been a little bit different. Especially, I would say, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was a tragedy of worldwide significance, and we are still feeling the effects of that. Anyway, what I wanted to speak about briefly is what he called the Poor People's Campaign and the Poor People's March on Washington. This is at the very end. This began in 1967, actually. This was an expansion of King's what should I say, activities for basic civil rights, and I'll explain. It's actually, we go back to 1964, and this was the President Johnson and his war on poverty, which was declared in 1964, and this Johnson, who was very much, in my opinion, a tragic figure in the United States history, started an incredibly ambitious program to rectify problems of poverty in the United States. However, what happened was he and the government turned their attention in a very tragically unfortunate way to Vietnam, and the war on poverty was never able to be funded the way it should be, and basically sort of petered out. And that, in fact, has given conservatives ammunition to say that, you see, we tried the war on poverty, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because this is really a cultural issue, and blah, 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 blah. And there's things that I will get into later, perhaps. Some of you wonder what that has to do with music, but it will all come through at the end. Now, in 1967, at that time, Robert Kennedy asked the assistant of Dr. King, of the Reverend Marion Wright Edelman, to tell Dr. King to bring poor people to Washington to make hunger and poverty visible, since the country's attention had turned to the Vietnam and put poverty and hunger on the back burner. That's is very interesting, sort of, I should say, in a way, symbiosis, so that you did have someone in the establishment actually reaching out to the so-called radical Martin Luther King Jr. to bring the country back on course. And he came up with the Poor People's March, the Poor People's Campaign. And unfortunately, before he could actually realize this, he was assassinated. This is 1968, April 4th. It's just terrible. Now, the Poor People's March did take place, led by his follower, the wonderful Ralph Abernathy, and it collected people of different races, of everything, to actually show that the essential problem is the problem of poverty, the problem of economic inequality. And why, there's a lot more I can say about this. Well, there's Abernathy formed the committee, and they came up with an economic bill of rights, which included, and we can see this from today, a meaningful job at a living wage, a secure and adequate income for all those unable to find or do a job, access to land for economic uses, access to capital for poor people and minorities to promote their own businesses, ability for ordinary people to play a truly significant role in government. And this, of course, is very reminiscent of the populist platform some 80 years before, and rings a bell about what we are facing today. So in a certain sense, it seems like nothing has changed. But of course, things do need to change. Now, but why exactly am I saying this? And this I quote. It's something that Martin Luther King Jr. said March 18th, 1968. Let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. And we go back now to Yuma County, Arizona, and to migrant workers, that they have worth, that everybody has worth. That it's not that some people have more worth than others, right? And that everything that people do, whether it is you are a scientist, whether you are a politician, whether you are a CEO of a business, or whether you are a garbage collector, or you are a postal worker, or you work cleaning dishes in a restaurant, for instance, whatever. We are all, in a way, essential workers. And it's not that some people have more rights or should have more rights than other people. This was what Martin Luther King was trying to put across to the American people in 1968, just before he was assassinated. And it is interesting that at that time, 67 to 68, you had much more, I should say, FBI, both harassment and surveillance of Martin Luther King and of the movement that he spawned. So I come back to today, and I'm very glad that we do have our Bernie Sanders as budget in the budget office, and hopefully something will be able to be done about an essential issue which we see from more than 100 years ago to today, that's coming back and has been basically unchanged. I should say that Sanders' mittens were also pretty cute. People will understand that. So we are musicians, and our job, in a way, is to inspire humanity in the best sense of the word. And of course, in that way, we are essential workers. Before I go on to the actual substance, I should say, rather than the harangue of this live stream, just one more thing, and this is actually in a way of segueing to what I will be doing. And this is an article from the Journal of Physiology, just very recently, where they say scientists discover that just imagining exercising can make you stronger and can tone your muscles and delay or stop muscle atrophy. So it says that a new research study suggests that just thinking of exercising can have the same effects as actually hitting the gym. What the article did not state was how you think about exercising. I think if you think about exercising with a lot of trepidation, then it's not going to work. Okay, so it goes on that scientists have long known the connection between the brain and muscle movement, but now have discovered that imagery techniques can delay muscle atrophy. This new development may lead to improvements, as the article mentions, in neurorehabilitation and will help control negative effects of aging, something that we all would like, I think. Okay, now I read that, and it's another of these things where I read and I thought, interesting. They could have just asked me. Because as a musician, one thing that I do very often is I practice in my imagination. I practice physically in my imagination, in fact. And now, of course, I'm just home. But when I've been trotting around the world in airplanes, I would spend a decent amount of time in the airplane just practicing in my mind. And guess what? It actually does work to a certain extent. It's not a complete substitute for actual physical work, but it is, I believe, a kind of essential adjunct to practicing. And with that, I move on to actually technique and music and expression. Okay, so I get this a little bit more organized here. 1 second. I think I have enough battery that I don't have to do something unusual. And I go back to here. Yeah. And I'll go to here. Leave this here for the moment. And now, shall I just put this away? Because yeah, here. Because I sit down for these things because somehow it's here. But here, I think we should put this up a little. Is that? Need to. Okay, before I go on, though, I just want to mention briefly about what I'm thinking in terms of future live streams, and I will be continuing this, I think, for the duration of the pandemic. as much as I can. And I will begin once again. This is, of course, the whole election time that we've been in has made me focus on very specifically American kinds of things. But those things, of course, also are very important for everyone in the world because of the position that the United States actually finds itself in. Am I mumbling now? I am mumbling, right? Okay. So I'll speak a little louder. I realized I was mumbling. We actually have these contact mics, but we haven't been able to test them yet. So hopefully next time we'll use them, and perhaps any mumbling issues will disappear because of that. Okay, so I will actually go back to introducing composers from the past and also from the present who I believe somehow are, not somehow, but just are underrepresented or have gone out of favor, but perhaps they should not be, etc., etc., etc. And I will start that actually next week with that. And also, I also would like, I should say, to invite anybody of you who is watching these live streams, listening to these live streams, to let me know if there is not only a piece or a general topic that you would like me to discuss, but even if there's a particular technical problem. Let's say on the clarinet, of course, that makes the most sense. But it could be even a general problem of technique on pretty much any musical instrument, to which I can perhaps offer my 2 cents or 3 cents about. So I invite all of you, don't be shy, please let me hear from you. I think that could be worthwhile and kind of fun for us. So I'm now moving on to issues of the embouchure, which I touched on before, though I was dealing more with fingers. And I will deal with fingers too. Maybe I start with fingers just a little bit, because one thing that's very important, I believe, just like in sports, this needs to be higher, right? Yeah, I think that's the issue. Okay, is this any better? People. Or maybe it's not working. Is it? Yeah, it's working? Yeah? Is it better? Yeah, all right. So, just as in sports, stretching is exercises and sort of limbering up is very important. It's very important for us as musicians. And people have warm-ups they do, etc., etc. But the warm-ups that I'm talking about are warm-ups to do without the instrument. Right? And they're very simple things. And I just show you what I do, and you can actually make up things for yourselves. I'm not particularly systematic about any of this. I'm also not very systematic about warm-ups myself. I think that they can be quite individualized. So, in fingers, the first thing is just to shake yourself. So I'm always doing that. And I actually do that sometimes, even in performance. Oh, higher. Yes, I got to do higher. I'm doing here, and you can see. So here, and then also just kind of this way and this way, this way and this way, with kind of big motions that way. because the biggest issue in finger technique is that if the fingers have kind of resistance to moving, you actually enhance a kind of what should I call this? It's an isometric tension, which can lead to very serious problems. That's right. So here, and I think it's very important to stretch your hands this way and to feel that your fingers here. And I have worked with the rubber band for showing how to control fingers, but also you can work here, and especially this kind of stretch like this from both ends here. What's that? Yeah, I'll show you here. Can you see now? Okay, you see. So I'm using the rubber band as a kind of stretching, and the other thing is just to stretch, because one thing that can be very dangerous is what's called carpal tunnel syndrome. And we have very small kind of pathway here for nerves which go into the hand and into there, and compression this way can actually compress the pathway. It's actually a kind of sheath over the nerves there, can compress them and eventually create injury to that, which can affect your fingers in a very detrimental way. So this kind of stretch here is very important, I find. I mean, don't stretch to the sense that you're going to injure yourself the other way around, but anyway, always. So I'm always stretching that way, and I stretch this way, and this way, and this kind of thing here. This, I like this very much because where I should use a clarinet. What clarinet should I use? I think I'm going to use this. Oh, this reed is totally broken. Let's see what it was. So the edge came right off completely. So if I do this and I do that, then you can just play like that because your hands go. So that's one thing. Or, yeah. But probably I could not quite do that before I did my little stretching exercise. Maybe I could have, but I have to mention to everyone, I keep wanting to somehow play the instrument and warm up, etc. before these live streams, but it never works. So I come in here completely cold. But then again, I think I've been warming up for the past, 40 years, something like that. So anyway, I'm kind of perpetually warmed up. But so this kind of stretch is important for the fingers, and also then used for the hands, shoulders. Because we have always a tendency, especially as clarinetists, but if it's all instrumentalists, have particular issues with kind of muscle movement or muscle, I should say, it's kind of stasis, but in the wrong way, which will affect us, and not only affect our playing, but affect us in our daily lives. And in the clarinet, for the clarinet, I don't know why I keep putting that back there, but this is, the problem is the shoulders, that way, which ends up creating tension all along these lines here. Anyway, I put this back, but I will put this out a little more. I have a feeling I'm not going to use this clarinet. I'm mumbling again, or can you hear me? Yeah. So I think kind of stretching here and there, here and there, and I even have stretching here, 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 and back, and also in the back. I stretch that way, and very good stretching exercise I've done. Maybe I do that here. I keep my hand here, foot here, and face this way. I'll say in the back. We can do. Let's say this here. And you hold for 15 seconds or so. And there are other stretching exercises, but these are sort of upper body exercises, which I like to do all the time, just to maintain the kind of stretch. And then, you know, there are other things like just touching your toes and stuff like that, which are not bad for you, and sort of going up on your toes and down, and then this way, up, and then feeling your feet, this here, and touching your toes here. Things all this time. What's that?
Hard to begin.
Hard to do. I know. We don't have the equipment to actually do all this stuff. You can move down with it.
Kind of.
Well, we don't need it. You can say this is all. So this is just hopefully for everyone who's listening, food for thought. And remember, even if we imagine stretching and stuff, perhaps it actually has some kind of effect. Now the embouchure that we have, and I cannot emphasize enough what I've been always come back to, which is this feeling of this rubber band. This. And this kind of exercise with this. I do all the time, not only right before I'm playing the clarinet, for instance, but just right, basic kind of stretch. And I will talk about that in a later class in an even more interesting way, perhaps, because we'll talk about what's called mewing. Okay, so just keep mewing in mind, because I will come back to it. And that's also how in fact chewing gum can help, believe it or not, to sort of stretching the muscles here. People are probably wondering, what is he talking about now? This is right. So back to the embouchure, this which stretches the muscles here and also stretches the tongue inside the mouth. Yeah. So I feel as I go that the mouth is going this way, and the tongue is pushing up and out in the back and down in front as well. Now, I don't know, did I mention ever the exercise with the reed in the live stream? Not so sure. Well, maybe I did early on, but I'm not so sure I have. I've done also so many master classes that I forget where I did what. So I will do this again, and probably there are some people who were not watching, how many months ago would it be? Let's say, God. Yeah. It's 10 months ago. That's right. Well, I didn't need to count it. It's easy. Because now it's January, the end of January, and we started March. But anyway, yeah, that's 10 months of the live streams. Wow, I can't believe it. Okay, so this is an exercise which is also very important, I think, for people to do, and see if we can feel this. So we have this feeling of the rubber band stretching this way, and I do this again for people. Here's a rubber band, and you feel that you stretch down. As you sing, going up, which pulls the tongue this way, and stretch down. And now you take a reed, and the first thing you feel that here, where your jaw meets your head, that this is actually kind of relaxed here. This relaxes. And then if you open your mouth, people can actually do this. You find that there's a space, of course, as the hinge actually moves from the jaw hinge that you have here. Then if you keep your mouth closed and do the same, you still feel the space. There. Then the important thing is with the reed here, you can probably do with any kind of something that you can put in your mouth, I imagine. But I like to use reeds because, especially if you have your worst reed, and of course I'm sure you have hundreds of them, that you can get some use out of them. That's. Shall I show people? No, you don't want to show my reed collection. No, I won't show. It's both impressive and embarrassing. I think thousands of reeds I have. So anyway, so you take a reed, you put it in your mouth, and I put it the opposite way. Because I'm not going to use this to play, and I pull it into my mouth with this kind of pointed chin, which I'm sure that everybody who has ever studied clarinet has been told that by their teachers that point your chin. So anyway, so that actually has some kind of use. And then you do the stretch exercise here. So I'm stretching my mouth, opening, and I'll hold my reach here, so I can feel the space here. So I don't crunch, but I do the opposite. Can you hear that all? Yeah. And you can see that the reed actually goes up. Shall I turn to a side perhaps? How's this? Okay. So it's not we're not, but we're not, but you're actually doing things that are kind of involve a kind of counteraction, because your jaw is moving this way, but also sort of slightly forward, and that pulls the reed up. Once again. And I found that this is probably the most effective exercise to feel what an embouchure is. This way. Because you feel not only that the lips are doing something, but something inside the mouth is. And I'll use this again. I probably shouldn't use this at all. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the ligature. I don't like this ligature. This one I think is going to be better. Maybe then I don't have to worry about a reed, even though this is broken. Here we are. It's a lot different, isn't it? Yeah. There is something to equipment, I have to say, even though I wish there were not, but there is something to equipment. So that's when you're playing, you actually involve yourself in this stretch all the time. So this end part of this exercise, I do this again. I do my using this one perhaps here. Go here and there. If I do this, I can sort of feel here with just one hand. And then, well, actually, I should say what I'm going to do and then just do the whole thing as an exercise. And then I just play a note. So, here. And I just feel how the note "wa" works this way. This way. So that the stretch is as I'm playing. And this is rather interesting, because what that means is that when you actually make the embouchure to play, you don't close your mouth, but you open it. But at the same time, you close your lips. I should still choose another reed. Equipment does make a difference, but I won't do that. Okay. Now, to create nuance with the embouchure, we do not, as classical clarinetists in the world nowadays, generally play with vibrato particularly. That's right. I have personally no antipathy towards vibrato. I know there are people who were totally terrible. That was apostasy to actually use vibrato. And there were also schools of playing, sort of in England, the older school of playing, and in what was Czechoslovakia and Czech Republic and Slovakia. That was very much a school of classical playing which used vibrato. That's of course jazz clarinetists who use vibrato, folk musicians will generally play with vibrato also. So there's some bizarre reason that classical players basically do not play with vibrato. I don't quite understand. Although I was trained to play without vibrato as well. And what was always mentioned to me about this by clarinetists who were adamant that you should not play with vibrato, And my father was kind of in that school. He was very forgiving as a person, but he came out of the school where you don't play with vibrato, which is in the United States. The two main teachers at the time, my father, were Simeon Bellison, who, by the way, I can see here, there's a young Simeon Bellison. Is this okay that way? It's a very nice little photograph. And Daniel Bonnard, who was a French-Swiss clarinetist. They were both, in a way, imported into the United States. And Bonnard by Stokowski, I believe, and Bellison began with the New York Philharmonic under Toscanini. But both of them were sort of adamantly anti-vibrato. And the explanation that was given to me by people who were their students, etc., about the idea that you don't play with vibrato on the clarinet was that the clarinet can have different intensities and colors of sound without vibrato. Now that's, I'm sure, true of any instrument, not only the clarinet, but it was kind of made into a sort of fetish on the clarinet. But how you do that was never explained. So I will explain how you make different kinds of intensity and color on the clarinet, what you actually do physically with the embouchure in order to do that. People say, well, there are different vowel sounds, and none of that, I think, really actually is what people are doing. And I'll also explain how, when you do this kind of difference in intensity, that can actually lead to a vibrato. Maybe I preface this by saying that I also believe that the idea that you play without vibrato is something that is fairly recent in the clarinet, and even those the period players, etc., and I play a lot of period clarinets as well. They say that they didn't play with vibrato. That string players didn't play with vibrato. Of course, this is all nonsense, and you read texts, as I did very early from Leopold Mozart in the Livestreams, and Gemignani, and there are others as well. Also, always mentioned that you do use vibrato. It's just that vibrato is not something that's used all the time, but is used for effect. And of course, even as classical clarinetists, we can and probably should use that for effect. I also mentioned at the time that a big deal has been made nowadays about the fact that Richard Mühlfeld, Brahms' clarinetist, played with a pronounced vibrato. Now that comes from a violist who actually spoke to Jack Brymer, the English clarinetist, who played with vibrato, by the way, about the violist's experience of playing with Mühlfeld at the time. But what to me is more interesting is that I've gone through as many of the concert reviews and sort of notes that people wrote or letters about Mühlfeld's playing from the time of Mühlfeld, from his time, and I have found no mention of vibrato or non-vibrato. Now, what I take to mean by that is that vibrato was not important. In fact, the fact that he played with vibrato was not strange, and probably there were others who did play with vibrato as well. But what was important was everything else. People mentioned the range of color, the range of how he could play like a bassoon in the low register and a flute in the high register, and the wonderful sense of phrasing that he had, etc. But as I mentioned, never was there any hint of something about the fact that he played with vibrato. And I've gone through a few hundred different both concert reviews and letters and notes that people wrote in diaries about his playing, etc., etc. So, with that said, I go back to how I create, and I think how people generally will create different kinds of intensity and color, and how you can feel that. And you do that by this exact stretch of the mouth. And you can add intensity to a sound, so that if I'm playing, for instance, and I just hold that way, I just get one sound. But if I stretch the mouth, does that come across in this at all? Yeah, or should I change my reed? No? Yes? What do people say?
Even bad read sounds okay.
Okay, bad read sounds okay. This is the live stream motto. Okay, but I have a feeling that I'd rather play a different clarinet than this. Maybe with the same mouthpiece or with a different mouthpiece. Hold on. Because I had something else. You know, I think this was it. Last week, because I was very... I liked last week very much. And I don't know, I played a reed which was a couple years old. Again, another live stream reed. I show this. This is the reed I played last week. Again, you can see it's so nicely dirty. Okay, so I think I'll play this way now. The question is, I haven't played this since last live stream. I always go and play really terrible reeds when I practice. Maybe not. Hold it, I don't give up yet. That's really funny. Well, I almost have that one as a backup. Okay, I know everyone's probably thinking I'm just totally nuts. But I do this also because people are so unbelievably obsessed with the reed. So I hope this would be what I do in these live streams. It's kind of humorous antidote to that a little bit. And it's good to have a tiny bit of obsession. Wow, this is so loose now too. God, nothing's working all right. I should take care of things better. That does work. Okay, good. So anyway, so the stretching of the mouth is something which is very, very useful and actually creates nuance. By the way. So I'm always having this feeling that the mouth is opening and the tongue is also stretching this way. And you do this in various ways. Now, to understand this well, a very good exercise, which is something that people probably often will say, no, this is not good at all, but I actually think it's quite good, is to see how much you can drop the pitch. And you will find out, especially on the top notes, you can drop tons. Down, you cannot drop as much, but you can. Even a low B, which you can read in many texts, says, which will say that you cannot vary the B. This is concert A on B flat clarinets, or that's a half step lower, A flat on A clarinets, or whatever instrument. But you can get easily a quarter tone, and I can probably do more. So it does, yeah, I'm doing pretty well on that, but could be more. If I had a better read, but you see, this is one of the very important exercises, and what this enables you also to do with some practical things, like for instance, this is a point, and I wondered, somehow, I've talked about this in so many different kinds of venues that, I have another, I'll use this here. No, this is this, I use this because this is an A clarinet that I need. Take this A clarinet. And there's in the second movement of the Bartók contrasts, for instance, and you'll find this in other pieces too, but that's a very famous place, which is for A clarinet, and I actually believe that it should be played on the A clarinet, in fact, although for years I didn't play it I played it on B flat for only one reason, and it's because there is a particular tremolo, which is right there. And the thing is that basically, unless you don't have a very specifically altered instrument, I should say, that tremolo doesn't really exist in a comfortable way. But and on our it does on German instruments, but not on our little French instruments here. So this kind of thing is way too sharp this way. But there's the interesting nature of the clarinet, which is at the higher note you can always lower without lowering the pitch of the lower note. If you sort of structure your embouchure the right way, you can play that way. And I discovered that.
Sorry, do it again because I didn't show the fingers.
What happened?
Didn't show the fingers. Do it again.
Oh, it didn't show the fingers. So what I do basically is just to make sure about the pitch. I will play the normal fingering. And then go and do that. And in fact, you can do this with many notes. Then you can actually lower the pitch of the top note without lowering the pitch of the bottom note. So once again, I'm on the A clarinet now, but it's like you really lower whole pitch, whole step there, and the B. It's more than a quarter tone I can lower. And what that means, though, is that you have great control over intonation on the instrument. But you have to practice to be able to do this. And I'm so surprised about how many people are locked here so they cannot do it. So this is all this stretching of the mouth, which, so for instance, I do not play. I play. That's our beloved Nielsen concerto. Or so that stretching gives you great control over the color and intensity, which is what creates nuance in music. This way, if you play old instruments, you kind of have to do this, because they don't work with kind of sort of stiffness in this way. I mean, you can get anything to work, but they don't like it, basically. What's that? So with that in mind, from there, you can go to vibrato. And I don't really teach vibrato very well, I think, but the way I conceive of it on the clarinet is a combination of this sort of intensity of embouchure together with a feeling of kind of motion in the muscles down here, especially controlling the diaphragm. So if I'm playing, that goes. It starts with a, and that will create vibrato. One thing interesting about the instrument of Mühlfeld, and I had mentioned this in the live stream where I sort of highlighted the instruments that he played, the Ottensteiner clarinets, is that they had a kind of built-in instability which made playing with vibrato very easy there. And these instruments we play, especially the ones out of Blackwood, the Grenadilla instruments, have a stability, built-in stability, and I think that the development of clarinet from the 19th century till today has been one more of building in stability into the instrument than anything else. So that if we look at these clarinets here, we see that the mechanism is virtually identical to what Auguste Boffet and Hyacinthe Closet exhibited in, I think 1839, I actually believe. My dates are always a tiny bit fuzzy. It's little, I think it was sort of Paris Exposition, 1839. And the idea of the bore is not very different either. It's only can be only so much different, I think, because we have general acoustical principles which actually limit the possibilities of the bore. So, what you do find is little differences in the placement of the register key here, and differences in the size and placement of the holes. So early on, Closet, who was influenced by Böhm, who had really nothing to do with the Böhm clarinet, but the influence was that you have large holes which create more resonance. In fact, that's not really true. It does not create more resonance, but what it does do, large hole, it creates instability in the instrument. And Ottensteiner, who did his apprenticeship in Paris, and in fact listed Böhm instruments in his catalog, took the idea of large holes and applied it to his own system, this sort of modified Behrmann system, which then Erler modified further and sort of went into the modern German clarinet. So the large holes in that of the Ottensteiner also create this kind of instability, you see. And so nowadays that have shrunk the holes a bit, which I'm actually grateful for in a way, because my fingers are not so fat. And the Ottensteiner, I always have to practice a lot, and I always feel like what I should do is take a mallet and sort of squash my fingers so they become wider, because the holes are so huge. But the instability of the Ottensteiner clarinet does allow for a great flexibility of tone, and especially with a vibrato, because you can really move the pitch around a lot that way. But on the modern instrument, they say, you also can move it around, as I just demonstrated, and that will allow us to create a very sensitive vibrato. And even if you don't use the vibrato, that creates the ability to stretch the mouth, creates color and intensity. I go on with this just a little bit now, because I have another exercise where I open the mouth without dropping the pitch. So if I take a note, for instance, I'm pulling this down to the extent that, in fact, even the sound starts to break, because I don't have enough lip on the reed. It's not holding. You see, so. And you can go to the limit of where you can actually hold the pitch without dropping the pitch at all. I don't know, can you see it actually? actually happening here. I see how this is really opening up. That way. Low register. There. Okay. And that gives us not only control over tone and intensity, but allows us great control over intonation. Yeah, this way. So what time do I have exactly now? Well, it's pretty late, isn't it? So I always do this, and I always have to go on. So, well, what I want to do now, I will have a little time, is there are just a couple things in Carter that I think I missed it last time, and they're sort of basic. I explained a lot about how to get the different characters, about what the nature of rhythm is, etc., etc. But what I did not explain was just very practically, although I did talk about the multiphonic, I didn't explain how to do it exactly.
Oh.
I explained the fingering, but I didn't explain how to do it. And this has general applicability. And I'll go back to my B-flat clarinet with this damaged reed. And I explained about the that passage a little bit, but I didn't explain in a way how to practice it. That it works. And I'm not sure if I mentioned one little detail which is very important. But first I just do about this multiphonic, for instance, and we go back to the acoustics of the instrument and to the different sort of harmonics or partials, as we call them generally in English. This and how they work on the reed. Okay, is there one more time? That kind of thing here. Now to play a multiphonic, what you're doing to the instrument is you are actually playing the fundamental. You can play just the fundamental plus the harmonic of that fundamental, or you can have a fingering which will play particular partial of a note plus a different fundamental. Well, this way. So you can do, for instance, here that way, or if you have the register key down here, instead of this note on the bottom, you get that. You get a third bone above, so you get that. Okay, so this is the simplest way. You can have instead of going just a third partial, for instance, you could. You can do that, or the same. You can do that. Okay, and yeah, unfortunately, we have from the Bertolozzi book that I mentioned last time. I show people again. I don't know why I put it away. This is Bruno Bertolozzi. Here. Okay, and this is, at least as far as I know, and I think this is the first book about multiphonics on woodwind instruments, not only the clarinet, and it was very influential because composers used this book, unfortunately, to include multiphonics in their pieces. a lot of the fingerings are not really correct in that book, and the principles of doing the multiphonics are also unclear, and again, often not really correct. So I know. Okay. It's all right. So what you actually need to do in order to play multiphonics is you have to feel the different partials. So if I'm feeling this, I feel that the low note, the D, for instance, written D, I'm saying, this is not concert C, of course, on B flat, is around here on the reed. Do people see this? Yeah? And the A, which is pretty okay, but a little bit flat, is actually down here. You can actually find some other combination as well, but let's say it says here and here. So if I play one, first the low, I feel that there's that range here, the reed, and if I go in the middle between the two, I get both. And that is the essential principle of making multiphonics on the clarinet. So they are done in the front here. It's not like all the different things that Bertolozzi mentioned. And there you can be very precise about the kind of multiphonic that you have. So that if I play, that's my bottom note here with the register key. This it's kind of an F, written F, a little bit not quite in tune, but that's fine because we're just dealing with multiphonics. And then I play, which is the regular A. Then I go in between those two positions, then you get the whole bit. So that with Carter's multiphonic, which is, I always forget the finger if I don't play it in context. Isn't that weird? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's funny. I can, if I play the whole piece, it's no problem. But that's the odd way that memory works. But if I try to isolate it, I get myself confused. And of course, he uses that. And Carter was not actually quite aware of exactly the reason why you needed to use a fingering like that, and not simply that one. It's just that there ends up being too many beats, because at that point the intonation is not really good. So you between the you actually have interference, which creates the beats. So you have to use this other fingering. And again, the way you do it is very simple. First you find the low note, which is there, and then you find the high note. And the high note is not completely stable because it's a weird fingering. You never use that. In general, this C sharp plus these keys as a C sharp, written C sharp. But and the way I advocate learning something like this. So for instance, in this piece, where we will have something is start off by trying to play the low note and then adding the high note. So you feel the way it works. And then you can do that a little faster. So that. And then finally it can be together. And you feel how your positioning here actually creates that pitch, that multiphonic, I should say, dyad in this case. Now, when figuring out multiphonics that you play in other pieces, what should I say? I believe that you really, the real multiphonic really has two primary notes, and everything else is either a sympathetic or difference tone. Since summation or difference tone, I should mention. It's so here you get this kind of buzzing indistinct, which it's an interference by the two harmonic and the fundamental being slightly out of phase. That gives you. So when you're trying, I'm getting tongue-tied now. Hold it. It's okay. It doesn't even take even 10 seconds to it's really the primary two notes that you need to be concerned with. So I have, for instance, a passage in the piece which I played for everyone in the recording that I put on for the New Year, I believe it was. And this is a piece that I wrote. I will play this. I don't have time this week, but I'll play this next week once again for everyone. So I'm going to talk about it a little more. This is a piece I wrote called Threnos. And here we have these multiphonics at that moment. And I have multiphonic here as well. And right now I just explain a little there. They will have tones in the middle, but I'm only concerned with the outer tones in actually producing this. So the first then I'll go. Say that. So I'm playing the embouchure in between what would produce the high partial and the low partial. That way. Is there anybody asking a question about anything? People don't ask questions anymore. That's disappointing, certainly. But hopefully that means that my explanation is rather clear. And it's not that people are just falling asleep, they're so bored. Okay. What do we have in terms of time? I think we actually are done now. Oh gosh. But I want to do something, and people who can stay, I just want, because what I wanted to end with was here. One second. Was this. This is Amanda Gorman, the youngest poet, youth poet laureate and inaugural poet, who I I thought it was very wonderful poem that she recited for the inauguration. I was going to read it myself, but I thought that she can do it much better. So here, I just want to play it for people, and it's 5 minutes. So if you
Dr. Emhoff, Americans and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it. Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
And this gives me great cause for optimism. And with that, thank you all for bearing with me. See you soon again. Take care.